Hey,
Yes.
yes.
I said the old guys always have trouble with all this shit. It's like,
Um,
although I think I got a few years on you for sure. How you doing,
I
buddy?
don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
Are you north of 50?
No.
No, I think we're pretty close then.
All right, good. All right, I'm not looking so good right now because I'm fucking sweating because I just ran from my other bar to do this. It's this is the first day of having outdoor seating and everything, so it's like been kind of crazy. How's Buffalo?
Buffalo's good. Buffalo's great.
Yeah, is it
Yeah.
how is the COVID treating you up there?
COVID's been interesting, a lot of time at home like everyone else. But I'm working from home, so that's good. And but a lot more time with the family, and I don't know, learning to do new things.
Yeah,
So it's been all right.
it's all about improv, man. Just like figuring it out as we go. Uh, you done any music while in quarantine or?
Music, no, not
Yeah,
really.
I hear you. It's hard. Yeah, that's been like one of the weird things that you would think that you'd get a lot done, but it's like, especially if you have kids, it's just, the no school thing, all that shit is just a fucking crazy mind fuck. Um, yeah. What do you do for a living?
So I'm a social worker by trade. So I worked at least 12 years in an inpatient psych hospital.
Oh, wow.
Worked my way up. Was a clinical director there, but now I have a more boring job in social work. I'm in management at a insurance company. So still doing behavioral health, mental health, substance use. So
Has any of that changed at all since this whole thing kicked in? Have you like been dealing with more people with substance abuse problems or mental issues because of all this?
um, no, not yet. I think that's to come.
Yeah.
Um, the company that I work for handles mostly Medicaid. So I think with more unemployment comes more Medicaid. So it's crazy, but like our membership is growing. So it's interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we'll see when the CARES Act takes away what people are going to react like. I mean, I was predicting riots in the streets, but that hasn't happened yet. It's close, but I mean, down here it's just craziness constantly, but we're getting there. So I want to talk about Snapcase. So let's rewind. So Solid State was the first of Snapcase, correct?
That's right.
And
Solid State, probably around 1989,
wow, and how old were you? You were like 17?
senior in high school.
So we're the same exact age, actually. So yeah, I mean, that's wild. And were you guys playing a lot around Buffalo and the area?
No, it was kind of like, your first band. You don't play a lot. We did get to open for Uniform Choice. We did get to play some cool shows.
Awesome.
Um, Buffalo had a really cool scene at the time, mostly New York and Boston bands playing here. We had what we consider a legendary club, River Rock Cafe. It was like kind of like our place. Um, and, everybody kind of like, that's where they learn their hardcore chops, so to speak.
I mean, even like, yeah, the Goo Goo Dolls were still a punk band back then. So,
Goo Goo Dolls, so the Goo Goo Dolls and Cannibal Corpse, they were the two big Buffalo underground bands at the time. And Buffalo is such a small town that, you have the Goo Goo Dolls, Cannibal Corpse, and the 10,000 Maniacs all from here, and they all were friends hanging out basically at the same bar.
oh, wow.
An interesting thing, yeah.
That's cool. I'm a big early Goo Goo Dolls fan. Like I think their like first 3 or 4 records were awesome. I was like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that, but fuck everybody.
very very influenced by the Replacements.
Oh yeah. Oh, dude, the first 2 records are just basically, the Replacements records essentially. So Solid State. I mean, the one thing about Snapcase that I remember from back in the day is that you guys were interesting to me because you got really popular when you got signed to Victory and all that other shit, but you guys kind of refused to tour. except for in the summertime because everybody was going to college, and you guys actually made like a priority of doing other things with your life, unlike I did. And it's it was I mean, like it seems like everybody in the band is like gone on to do like be a professor or like be a teacher or like do something on a professional level. Is that a pretty good observation?
I would say so. I mean, yeah, we were, yeah. I mean, we were all pretty much into school academics, but not even just that. Like John has his own business, and he's really doing well with that. And that he's in the drag racing industry. And
Oh,
Tim did get his PhD. Scott, our earlier guitar player, who's my cousin, he has a PhD. You know, Frank and Dustin are involved in computers, and yeah. So there's other guys too. You know, other early members that did really well. And something that people don't know, but Jason Korkunis was one of our drummers in Solid State, and he went on to be in Hot Snakes, and he's been in like a million other bands. But killer drummer. But he's also another Buffalo guy.
did he end up in California for some reason, or?
He was in Philly for a long time, but I'm sure he's in California at this point.
I was gonna say, I mean, he's drumming for Hot Snakes. He must have made his way out there at some point. Well, that's
Yeah.
cool. I mean, yeah, like you guys definitely have a lot of members. I remember like every time I would see you, there was a different guy playing drums or playing. It happened quite often. And you were
Yeah,
the bass player of Solid State, correct? And the bass player of Snapcase in the beginning.
correct. Yeah.
And so how did that all happen? It was just like dude left and you were like, hey, I can do it.
No, not really. So my best friend was our singer, right? And he and I are still best friends. But so and then my cousin Scott and I, he was a guitar player. I played bass. I was sort of the guy who had the idea of the band, but like couldn't really play an instrument. So, I was like, well, I guess I'll learn how to play bass, and that's Scott will have to show me like the riffs and things like that. So that's how that came about. And then when Chris left the band as the vocalist, the other guys were sort of like, you should be the singer. And I was kind of like scared out of my mind. I don't know what I'm going to do, but that's what we did. And it wasn't too long after that we were, because we were already signed to Victory. We already had a 7-inch out with Chris as the singer. And we were going to record with Don Fury. So that was sort of my first studio vocal experience. So
I mean, Don's fun to work with, but that he's definitely pretty. When we did, and Don got arrested the night before. We showed up to the studio and Don was in jail because he was like public drunkenness or some shit, and it was like, so wait, so what do we do now? It was like super weird experience. I don't know what your experience was like. What year is that? Like 92?
So this would have been Looking Glass South. It would have been recording probably 93.
Okay.
So our experience was not great. We went there, with this glorified vision of what it was going to be like. I don't know. I probably pictured all the New York Rev guys hanging out or something. But, when we were there, it turned out that we had no place to stay. So some of us slept in the van. And the locals harassed us all night, and we were scared out of our minds.
Totally.
And at that time, New York was still Manhattan was still pretty rough. So, yeah, they tried to blow up our van. They put an explosive on our engine. They popped the hood, it was nuts. It was crazy.
Holy shit.
And then Don Fury was served papers by his ex-wife or wife at the time, divorce papers. So he was just miserable, super pissed off, smashing stuff. Yeah, it was bad, really bad. I mean, I think the only thing I really remember from that was that we got to use one of the guitar amplifiers that was used on Start Today or something like that. So, holy shit, this is cool. But
EV bass amp too that you would record all out of. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that was one of your first experiences. I had already recorded with Don numerous times at that point, and I was probably close to recording that at that time with Mind Over Matter, around that whole Wreck Age scene, all that shit. We all went to Don, But yeah, he was hey guys, what's up, man? Yeah, he was a fucking trip. And he's up by you now. Well, not really by you, Troy.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, I guess if you live in the city, you think that's by us, but yeah, that's far.
I know. I think I've traveled enough to know. So, Looking Glass Self, you guys are already signed to Victory, and Looking Glass Self comes out, and I think that's around when I met you. Played a show together. I think we talked about this at Vitus. We played a show together in Boston, and at some weird place that was upstairs. And
Right.
I remember, like, I mean, I think you even opened for Bad Trip. Which,
Oh yeah, no, definitely. It was Bad Trip and you guys and I feel like Sam Black Church played, but I could be wrong.
I mean, back then when Sam Black Church was being courted by everybody. Yeah, they probably. I wouldn't doubt it. But I mean, you guys were like a lot more in the sort of standard period at that point. You know, and I always liked about you guys is that we're into other types of music, and you progress beyond. Even you go on tour with Sick of It All, it didn't sound, you know, and it was always very. It was cool. And what was your experience with Victory as a whole? Because I mean, there's a lot of people who had really bad experiences with Victory, who I've interviewed on this show. You know, like what?
So yeah, I mean, at that point, Victory was such a small label. I mean, they had put very little out at this point. You know, maybe
Integrity, right?
Integrity and Iceburn maybe, and even Score. I don't know. So we signed, and I think at the time I remember, we had a cassette demo. I remember going through Maximum Rock and Roll and looking for labels that were hardcore and just like looking for their address and mailing it to them, photocopying stuff, that kind of deal. And Tony said, "Why don't you guys come out to Chicago and play?" And I think we played with Farside, which was really weird. We played in Chicago with Farside, and yeah, and Tony was funny because he was like, I'm not sure that I get it, but all my friends really like it, so
Really?
yeah. And so I remember that's what we did. We were pretty excited. I remember coming home from that. We borrowed a car with a trailer hitch and pulled a U-Haul trailer, and then we blew the engine on the car on the way home. And we had no money. I remember we pushed the car back in the kid's driveway. It was terrible. But we got signed. That's all we cared about. A mission accomplished, So, and Tony was at that time. Tony was working as a waiter in a Chicago restaurant, and he was living in like a basement apartment, and he had all the records stacked against the wall. And yeah, I mean, the record label was just him in his basement at that time.
I mean, he's a hustler and it's that was such a crazy period, like with you guys and TBS and Thursday and like all these bands. I mean, you guys were earlier than that, but like, I've had Adam from TBS on, and I've had I had Tucker from Thursday on, and it's just interesting to like hear everybody's perspective on Victory because it was such a big deal at the time, such a bad reputation, and mostly because of things that Tony was involved in. So it was like, I mean, there were even like I think Endpoint left the label at one point, right? Just because
I don't know. I don't know if Endpoint was on there. So at that time, so after us, I think came Earth Crisis and then Strife. And I can't remember who else right around that time, but Dead Guy around that time, and then shortly after maybe Hatebreed, and then you started seeing the bands fall off one at a time, like Hatebreed, and then Thursday kind of came and went, and then Taking Back Sunday came and went, and these bands, once they got successful, the successful bands like really were the ones getting screwed, and were the ones that had the falling out, and they also had offers to go to other places. So
yeah, I mean, and so did you guys ever have those offers? Did like the majors come calling?
Yeah, kind of. And there's some funny stories about that. So we did. We had some things happening, and we finished our contract, and we met with a few labels. And at the time, Tommy Boy was looking to sign hardcore bands. So I remember going to New York and meeting with, I guess it's Tom Silverman, and it was a very awkward meeting. He didn't understand hardcore. He was being told he should sign bands like this, that heavy music was going to explode on the radio and things like that. But the meeting was so awkward, I just knew it wasn't the place for us to be. I think he asked me how many BPMs our music was. So he was always thinking in terms of dance music, and he talked to me about like Madonna and, House of Pain was on his label and stuff like that. So I just knew we were in the wrong place. He said he sent a team out to our shows, and the biggest thing they noticed was a lot of kids wore backpacks, and he wanted to market a Snapcase backpack that was called like the Snapcase, and it was like, I don't know, it was goofy. So and then we met with we were supposed to meet with the guy from the Offspring. He did Nitro,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we went out to California, and he didn't show up, and we were kind of like, I don't know what we're doing here. I mean, I think AFI was already there, and maybe Ensign. So we're like, we had some friends there, and we were like, oh, this could be cool, but I don't know. I don't think we were that serious about it, and we took a free trip, and I think we went to see Far play when we were out there, and we ended up playing some songs on their instruments at that show, and that was kind of neat too. So
Yeah. Awesome. Wow.
Alyssa Milano was at that show hanging out, so that was interesting.
Yeah, I was just like, you guys, I think you guys have had 10 former members, which is pretty impressive.
I wasn't aware.
Yeah. You should.
I feel though that like we've had a very consistent group of people, like, I mean, Tim left for a while, and Ben played drums for a number of years, but other than that, it's been myself, John, Frank, and Dustin since like, I don't know, like 97 or something.
Yeah, it's yeah, but it's, if you look on your Wikipedia, you got to see it. It's pretty impressive, I got to say. But I mean, you guys were all kids, so
Yeah.
it's like come and go. So when did things start getting like serious for you guys? I know like when you got signed to Victory, if I remember correctly, you still wouldn't really tour except in the summertime, and
we toured.
issue.
Well, what we did was, go ahead.
No, good. Go.
We toured. We would leave for tours the second this school semester ended, and we'd tour all summer, and then we would tour every single school break, and we'd go on like a winter tour also. But there was some point where we did like 10 months. We toured 10 months of the year for like 2 years. So we did some pretty heavy touring. But our first, so I think it was around 94, either right before Looking Glass Self came out, or, yeah, I'm not sure if it was out or not, but we did a US tour. It was our first US tour. It was with Lifetime.
Oh.
And that's how we met Margie. Margie was booking Lifetime, and I don't even remember how we connected with that, but that was our first time going out to the West Coast and things like that. And I don't know, it was just great after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think from that point on, you guys really never played shitty shows, unless I don't know what Europe was like for you, or any of that stuff. But I mean, getting the fuck out of Buffalo in the wintertime is always a good move. I remember playing the show with Airtype that you were actually at during one of the worst blizzards I'd ever experienced, and we ran in a trailer. And it was on this dead end street. We were playing in somebody's house. It might have been Vic Lazar. And
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I had to make a U-turn, and I was just like, I couldn't see anything. I was like, how the fuck people live up here? Shit sucks.
It was probably a standard Buffalo winter day for us, but yeah.
I mean, I think 2 feet of snow fell, and like Vic was like surprised we showed up. But yeah, man. So so Looking Glass South, Progression Learning, um, like what kind of records? Like how many records are you guys selling at this time? Like, are we talking like hundreds of thousands and like?
You know, I don't know. I think the first record that where we realized that we're selling a good amount of records and at a good clip, and that was because Victory was, you know, that's when Tony was really like all about that. You know, we were getting like, what were they? Sound scan? Is that what it was called?
Sounds good. I think.
Sound scan. We were getting sound scan reports, and like that was like, you know, Victory was so high on that, and like sound scan reports were everything to everybody at the time, and it kind of bummed us out. You know, like we were getting more popular and selling a lot more records, but you know, I think we were feeling like I don't know, the essence of why we started a band and why we got into this in the first place was all being lost, you know, and it started getting kind of goofy, and it was like, you know, when you're like a punk metal hardcore kid, you don't really think about marketing, and all of a sudden everyone's talking about marketing, and that's when it gets kind of goofy. And you know, there's some value to it, but you know, ultimately it's not important. I mean, all that really mattered to us at that time, Progression Through Unlearning, was we felt like we had finally found our sound with the Steps EP. Like this is Snapcase. This is where we're going. This is what we sound like. But the Steps EP sounded like a really flat recording, and you know, we were this like energetic live band. So when we did Progression, and we wanted to work with Steve Evans because of Lifetime and because of Dead Guy, we just basically said we want to sound like we sound live, but tight. And so that's what he did, and he pushed all of us super hard, and as everyone knows, he cranked up the snare drum, and
Yeah.
you know, he made me scream harder and harder, and he made us play the tempos faster than we had planned, and yeah, he pushed everything, and it was amazing.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I've never worked with Steve before. Um, but I mean, obviously, yeah, I mean, especially the Dead Guy stuff was always something that was like just sounded so good, and all like yeah, and just those guys that played on that record, I think alone make it that, you know, like that. What what like around this time, like who you like, what are you doing? Are you still touring on a lot of Victory band tours and that sort of shit?
Well, you mentioned Europe, and if we ever had a hard time there, and we were really fortunate. Our first European tour was, I think, in '95, maybe it was '94, was with Sick of It All. So sitting at home, and we get this call saying, you know, Sick of It All wants you guys to go to Europe with them and share a bus and do this. I don't know. It was initially like an 11-week tour. It was like
Wow.
Rock Hero.
11
So
weeks.
we went over there, and Sick of It All was really starting to blow up in Europe. So like we went to all these huge festivals, and like all, you know, we were playing like really big shows with them over there. Like those were the biggest shows we had ever played, you know. So our first time in Europe, we were playing these huge clubs. So it was crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, MAD booked that tour, I bet. Was that MAD tour?
Yeah, that was MAD. And then, so after that, like you asked about what kind of bands we were touring with, at this point, it was really like all the 90s hardcore bands that you can think of, like Turmoil and, of course, Earth Crisis and Strife a lot, Lifetime. You know, we eventually like met up with The Veil. I know I'm going to forget some great bands here, but yeah.
Well,
And then playing tons of shows with other bands like 108 and
yeah.
you know, things like
I
that.
mean, and famously, that last Refused tour before they broke up, which I saw at the PWAC, which was fucking awesome. And yeah, like you guys always like. Actually, I remember playing a show with you guys in Glassjaw in like 2001 on Long Island, and it was just fucking awesome, man. Like just killer shit. Like, yeah, it's I mean, it's not as good as the St. Vitus shows were. Those were awesome, but but and thank you for playing those. I really appreciate it. So designs for automation or automation.
Automotion.
Yeah, automation. Right. You always did that. Just confuse people. Who did you work with on that record?
That was Steve Evans also. So we went back to Steve Evans, and yeah, so it's interesting. I sometimes, you know, now that it's so many years later from all of our albums, you know, and you think, and you follow other bands, and you think about a band's trajectory, and like, when do they find their sound, and where did they really like hit that sweet spot, or, you know, or some bands maybe each record gets better. I look back at Snapcase and I feel like we found our sound in Steps EP, and then we kind of like fine-tuned our sound in Progression through Unlearning, and then Designs for Automotion, we were starting to do like Warped Tours and things like that. And I think there's some cool moments on that album and some cool songs, but overall, when I listen to that, I feel like we were already like departing from what we were best at, which was the stuff on Progression. And
what was there a certain influence that was making you want to do something different, or?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of things, you know, at that time. Probably, you know, like Refused at the Drive-In, Deftones. I mean, you know, listening to some other just interesting music, but starting to kind of like, I think also trying to like, we were trying to not be so hardcore. I think we were trying to cater to like a Warped Tour crowd or something, and which in hindsight's kind of lame, you know, I'm looking back at that, but I don't know, we sort of watered ourselves down, you know, but we worked hard on those songs, and I still think there's some cool stuff on there, but I don't know.
I mean, those Warped Tours were, at that point, what is that, like late 90s, early 2000s? They were like massive, crazy.
Yeah, they were crazy.
You guys are on like the main stage and like playing like in front of like the whatever it was, 8,000 people.
Yeah, I guess. I don't remember. It depends when what time of day you played, you know, like sometimes they put you on at 11 in the morning, and sometimes you played, you know, later. You know, honestly, my favorite Warped Tour moment was, I don't remember if it was the last Warped Tour we did, but it was the last show of a Warped Tour. And it was in Philadelphia, and they put us on last. So we were like completely miserable all day. Like, nobody's going to give a shit about us at this point. You know, like all the people that came to see all those like really big bands are going to be gone or leaving. And it was like the coolest moment because people hung around, and because it was the last show of the Warped Tour, all the bands hung out. And I just remember being on stage, and guys from like bands that I really looked up to, and skaters like Cab were up there, and it was just like an amazing moment. We played, and the crowd went nuts, and it's just, I'm not a big fan of hardcore outdoors. I'm not a big fan of that, but that show was really, really special. It was really cool. And then right after we played, I was catching my breath behind the stage, and someone literally like lifted me up, picked me up off the ground, and I'm like, what the fuck? Who's this? And it was Fletcher from Pennywise, and he picked me up. I don't know why, but he picked me up and he carried me and set me down. And he goes, get the rest of your band together. I was like, okay. So I said, guys, come here. And he gave us like, I don't remember how much money it was, maybe a couple $1,000s. And was like, you guys were like completely underappreciated, underpaid, blah, blah, blah on this tour. You know, this is from Pennywise to you guys. And then he said something like, well, don't tell the other guys in Pennywise, but it's from us to you guys. And it was really like the coolest gesture. And I was like, that was the camaraderie of that tour. It was cool.
That's awesome. I was always jealous I never got to a Warped Tour, but you know, I think I talk too much shit for what's nuts, the guy who runs it, Kevin, everybody had to be like this do-goody hardcore kid in order to be on that. You know, it's like I was too much of a shithead. But yeah, it's interesting. Who else was on? Who else was on that year that you were like?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember.
Was there ever any band on the Warped Tour that you were like really paid attention to that you suddenly were like, holy shit, fucking great?
Hmm. Well, I mean, there was one where the Deftones were on one of the Warped Tours. God, I mean, when the Descendants were on the Warped Tour, I mean, that was like a kind of like a must see every single night. You know, a band that you loved growing up, and you got to see them night after night after night. It was really special. Descendants were just always great. You know, I was always amazed that they would play for 30 minutes straight without stopping every single day. They just come up and they'd start playing and they'd play for 30 minutes straight, no mistakes, nothing. You know, they were a machine and like just perfect.
You
Perfect.
did, so I saw you open for Tones in 1998, and if I remember correctly, yes,
I'm sorry. The sound count. We opened for who?
the Quicksand reunion tour with Deftones,
Yeah.
98, and I vividly remember that show. You guys were, it was awesome. And obviously, like, you know, I was coming off playing in a band with Walter at that point, and it was like that was such a weird. You have any weird memories of that tour? Because it was definitely like an odd thing for Quicksand. I know just because I know personally, you know, what they went through on that tour, but yeah. I mean,
No, that tour for me was amazing. I mean, it was one of the few like kind of like big production tours that I really enjoyed. You know, we got off to a super rough start with the Deftones tour crew, but after that was all good. But yeah, I mean, for us, Quicksand was one of our all-time favorite bands. I mean, like this is a band that we all loved for a really long time. We knew their music inside and out, you know. And then Deftones were sort of like our new favorite band, or you know, of recent years. So that was another band that across the board we all really loved. So it was just such an honor to be on that tour, and I don't know, kind of cool to hang out with all those guys.
yeah, fuck yeah. I just did, well, not just, but like, what was it, a year and a half ago, a Primitive Weapon tour with Quicksand Glassjaw. And I literally, like, I have this thing with Quicksand where, like, even though I can get backstage and stand on the side of the stage, I always sit at the front. Always. I can't help myself. It's like I say I'm not going to, and within a song, I'm up front singing every word, like freaking out. Like, it's like, Wally's the best. Yeah. But,
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a whole different experience of touring with bands that really, really worship. And like I've done a lot of the opposite, especially in that, like, around 2002, 2003, 2004, where I had to like tour with like fucking, you know, shit like that, and Korn and Benjamin. So it's like the difference between those experiences is so night and day. Did you ever tour with a band that you were just like, God, this shit sucks? These guys are assholes.
We did a tour with Face to Face and H2O, and we had been friends with H2O for a long time. And those guys are really awesome guys. We didn't know Face to Face, and you know, we had an expectation on the tour. We were told that H2O and Snapcase would switch on and off every other night for main support. And I think this was like the first tour we did where we tried to get a tour bus on our own. The drives were really long, and so we had saved up a lot of money, and I think we kind of like put it towards getting a bus. So in fact, I think we bought a van for the thing, and the van broke down in like the first couple shows, and then we had to get the bus. I think that's what happened. Anyway, we didn't get along well with the Face to Face crew at all, or their management, and it just went from bad to worse. So the bus that we could afford was really a shitty bus, and it broke down all the time. And so we would end up showing up late for these shows all the time. And Face to Face's production crew just kind of was really getting pissed off at us. They were really rude. They treated us like shit. And then we were just so like aggravated all the time that we just kind of took it out on stage. And like we were playing really well. Like we were just like tearing it up. And I remember playing in Detroit. We actually had to go on after Face to Face. So that was kind of like, they were the headliner, but we showed up so late.
Oh.
Somehow we still got to play, and it was killer. Like we tore it up. And by the time we got out west, we were really not getting along with those guys. And Ben was playing drums at the time with us, and he and I were doing laundry in a hotel, and we're talking shit about Face to Face. And this older guy was in the room, and he turned out to be their bus driver, and we had no idea. So he went and told them, and they were really, really mad. So we showed up late for a show in Arizona. I can't remember if it was in Mesa or in Phoenix. And we got there, and they basically were like, you guys aren't playing tonight. And we drove all this way to get there. We broke down in the desert, like all kinds of bullshit, right? So we got there, and like, you're not playing. We were super pissed. We were in the club. We brought in all our stuff. We're like, guys, we gotta leave. So these hardcore kids in the crowd were like, there's this local show down the street. It's at like a strip mall and a Chinese restaurant. Would you guys play there? And we're like, yeah. So they literally like hand wrote flyers and distributed them through the Face to Face show that we're gonna go down the street and play. And we played on top of like tables pushed together in this Chinese restaurant. And people were stage diving off the counters. Like it was beautiful. It was just like the craziest thing in the middle of this tour. And people went nuts, and it was just like, it was so great. And that pissed off the Face to Face crew even more and their management. And then the next day we drove all the way to San Diego, and they said, you're not playing again, go home. And so we drove back to Buffalo from San Diego. So that was our really shitty tour experience. So
wow, I mean, it's that sounds fucking super lame.
It was super lame.
People don't. I don't know if kids know like that shit, like that story you just told, like how often that would actually happen. It's like you'd be playing some basement or like some strip mall in fucking Tampa, or hardback in fucking Gainesville, or any of these places. There was such, I think I might have even played a fucking Kinko's at one point. Like it would just be like these guerrilla shows, because when you do shows back then, they would get shut down all the time because they weren't at real clubs, because the real clubs didn't want kids that young because they weren't drinking alcohol. So it's like, a lot of people don't understand, like the 90s were a fucking shit show, but it was awesome. It was super cool. Like I love that I had those experiences. So I wanted to ask you, why did Snapcase break up the first time? Well, I mean, originally, you haven't broken up again.
I can't really say there was any one thing. I'm not really sure. That's a question I don't know. I think that I don't really have the answer for that. I don't think we really knew what we wanted to do anymore. I think Tim was going along with his PhD program, and things were just really slowing down for us. I can't remember. I think that what we did next was we got offered.
Crap. Yeah.
We decided to do this tour of Japan, and that was kind of like what brought us back together. And then I think right after that we did the Quicksand Deftones thing. But I'm not really I'm not the greatest historian, so the fact checker on that might
sorry, man. Make sure nobody's gonna worry about it. Somebody just asked, was it the change in the Bills uniform? I don't think so.
The Bills uniforms have always been all right. The Sabres, the Buffalo Sabres uniforms they've had some terrible uniforms. So I mean, yeah, Buffalo. I mean, I can't really, the older I get, the more I really, really appreciate Buffalo. And, of course, it's a city, but I really appreciate the music scene. Like we talked earlier about Cannibal Corpse, Goo Goo Dolls, 10,000 Maniacs, um, older than that, Rick James is from Buffalo, which is kind of crazy. But from the underground scene after that, like Scott Vogel of Terror, like Buried Alive. I mean, Despair. There were other great bands. And Keith Buckley was on here the other day. Every Time I Die, like wow, like it's like one of the best, hardest working bands I've ever seen in my life. So it's cool. Buffalo's kind of put it together over the years, and I mean, there's so many other great bands too. But and of course, like, so for like, if you were to interview Scott Vogel, like he would tell you, and most of the guys in my band would tell you, like Zero Tolerance was like the Buffalo hardcore band that like, we all looked up to them. Like they were gods. Like to us, like they were more important than Sick of It All or Slapshot or any of the bands that were coming like through Buffalo. We were all like, obsessed with Zero Tolerance.
Was there I mean, you guys, was there a really strong relationship with Toronto? I mean, that seemed like the Canadian influence is so close there. It's
It is, I mean, and that is a cool thing, but I think like in the '90s, Chokehold guys, they were like, but
dude,
they were from Hamilton.
they
They were coming through.
those guys would drive like 15 hours to play a show. They were completely like the most. Like, they must have been typical straight edge bored kids. Like, oh, let's go play a show. Yeah, cool. Grade would be another one, obviously. They were on Victory, but
Oh yeah, great. Yeah.
You guys go and play in Toronto a lot when you were first starting out. Like, was that a thing?
No, not so much because the border was always a pain in the ass. You know what I mean? We had a lot of issues with the border, and Buffalo is like, we are like a border city. So like you can, I've ridden my bike into Canada before, my bicycle. I was telling someone the other day, pre 9/11, like I rode my bike into Canada, and on the way home, the line at customs was so long that I just skipped it. You know what I mean? Like I just basically biked back in over the bridge. Um, and we used to have crazy issues. Like I remember us and Undertow from Seattle, like they were with us, and we crossed the border, and customs opened the side of their van, and the one dude was sleeping in the loft underneath, and like he literally fell out of the van. Um, Crazy stuff like that, and yeah. So no, the border was such a pain in the butt, but Canadian bands came through Buffalo quite a bit, and one of the best bands that I remember seeing when I was first going to shows was SNFU. I mean, that band just tore it up. They were like one of the best live bands, that would come through Buffalo back then. Them, Sick of It All, Slapshot, DRI, like those were the bands I was really into back then.
Dude, so I mean, besides like hardcore and punk, because I know you're into a lot of other music, and like so what bands sort of influenced Snapcase to be the unique version of hardcore that you guys kind of became towards like the end of the '90s and late in the early 2000s? Like, what was there anything particular? You listened to like shoegaze, or you listening to like Britpop, or?
I think it starts earlier than that. I mean, for us, like the hardcore band that we really loved besides Quicksand was Verbal Assault. So like Verbal Assault was kind of a band that was like, they were, a heavy hardcore band, but they had like this groove. They had, different elements to them that made them unique. From when you go from the Trial album to the On EP or whatever. I think we always carried that with us. And then, we liked any band that was kind of like trying to do something new with hardcore, or new with heavy music. So we would gravitate towards those kind of groups.
Well, Helmet, right? I mean, Helmet was a pretty obvious influence, I think.
Helmet was huge for us. Um, but even some of the hardcore bands that, you know, are not always on the tip of people's tongues, like, so Threadbare, like Dustin came from Threadbare. So Threadbare was a band that like blew us away. And like you know, we would play with tons of like fast beat, you know, sing along hardcore bands. But like when you would come to a town and play with a band like Threadbare, you know, like that leaves a band like us like talking about that for days afterwards, and like, you know, we're all listening to it and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I feel like Dead Guy, Cola, Threadbare, there were a bunch of bands around that time that were doing things with heavy music that was really mathy and but really super powerful. And yeah, Threadbare. It's funny. I mean, I know Dustin's in Threadbare or was in Threadbare, but like they were definitely one of my favorites. Like they blew the fucking doors off the place. And I don't think I ever got to see them back in the day. And but they played Vitus. They did a reunion show at Vitus that was fucking awesome. So it took. I wanted to talk about this. It's kind of funny, but it took a lot to get you guys to play at Vitus. It was like I had to get a phone call from the guy who booked Tyler Kane, who booked Brooklyn Bazaar, and then I remember I got in touch with you or Doug right after that, and then I had to go through Margie, and then it like took like fucking forever. I was like, "What's up with these guys, man? We can fucking play, do this." You guys are. Is it something? Is it just like a lot of trouble? Like it's a lot of putting together and get it together to play.
I mean, we all are pretty busy, like in our own like careers and our own families and things like that. You know, we love. I mean, we all admit that we need the time together. I mean, it's kind of like what you realize is missing in your life. You know, when we're together, I mean, it's like we're right back acting like fifth graders. I mean, it's important, you know. But yeah, I mean, also John has such a busy schedule and he's always like on the road, and he actually wasn't able to play those shows. So
Yeah.
you know, so then it's like who's going to play in place of John and things like that, you know. We we're more used to playing now than we were even 2 3 years ago, you know. We're kind of like, but of course now who knows if we'll get to play again. But um, we've gotten to a point where we're getting together more regularly, and it was starting to feel better again, become more natural.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you have kids, right?
Yeah, I have one. I have a son, Desmond.
How old
He's
is
5.
he? He's 5.
Yeah.
I have a 6-year-old, and it's like it just makes it. It's like what you were saying. It's awesome that you guys just kind of fall right back into it and feel it. Like it's interesting. Like we're both speeding towards 50, and it's like it's a weird feeling to be like. I talk to Schreifels about this all the time. Where I'm just like, dude, seriously, like how long are you guys gonna play Need today? Like, it's like it's old of today. And he's just like, dude, I'm fucking doing this until I fucking drop dead. This is the best shit ever. And it's funny, like when it's a lot of trouble to actually get to do it or to make it all happen. But once you get up there, it's like, okay, cool, I got it now. You know, and it really puts you back in that moment of being, you know, besides being a little bit more tired than you used to be, but you know, it definitely puts you back in that moment. And like, you guys were fucking great at those shows, man. Like really super special to see, and I see people talking about it right now on the comments. You know, so the last time you had played, well, that was around the Sick of It All anniversary shows, was it not? Or was that before? No, it was before. But
Yeah.
Sick of It All anniversary shows, that was like 25 years for Sick of It All, so it had to have been.
So I think we did a Sick of It All that, but then we also did the show at Irving Plaza, which I think was just about a year ago.
Yeah.
That was with Slapshot and Sick of It All. So that came after, but the other one was, yeah. And then the most recent thing we did, so right before COVID hit, we got to go out to California and do we played in Denver, and then we played the shows in California with Earth Crisis and Strife, and did the California takeover shows. And
Oh yeah, that was at the observatory, right?
yeah, I think so.
That must have been awesome. Jeez. All right. Well, we're getting to the end here. They're going to cut us off as they usually do with Instagram. I want to thank you for doing this, and it's great to fucking hang out and talk, and just make sure you and your fam are good up there in Buffalo, and everybody's happy, man.
Yeah, same to you guys. And honestly, when I looked at who some of the guests were on this, I mean, like I'm really honored. I mean,
Oh,
thank you. This is great. So
you don't have to be. It's okay. But I appreciate that. I really do. Awesome, dude. So be good, and thanks for watching Age of Quarantine, everybody.
thanks, everyone.
Peace.
See ya.